Hey guys, welcome to RNerd. Today we're going to be talking about the need to change, and we're going to be looking at Space Jam the movie. Now, I just want to give a spoiler alert in case you're actually one of the few people on this earth that wants to see this movie. And I ended up watching it more out of curiosity than anything else, because to be honest with you, this movie for me just was very boring. It started off boring and it ended boring, right? Very formulaic, and the expectations were just all there. And the movie in and of itself is just filled with a bunch of just awkward moments that you just don't even know what to do with them. And I don't know if it's because of the acting quality, right, in certain cast members, or if the writing just wasn't good enough to merit those moments when they actually came. But enough of the review, I guess, of the movie, and more what we're here today is looking at change, right? So in this movie, the primary focus is the need to change. And to be honest with you, at first I thought that the focus of the movie was accepting yourself as who you are, because it just kind of goes with what, you know, we're pushing in society. But as I started thinking about this movie more and more, I really think that the focus is really on the need to change. And we see this in the character of LeBron James, who's basically forcing his kid to be another mini version of himself and pushing him into basketball and the things that he likes to do, where the kid doesn't have those same interests. He actually likes video games and he likes programming. So instead of LeBron encouraging his kid to follow these passions, he is forcing him to do the things that he enjoys and the things that he likes to do. So what we see in this movie is a journey of where LeBron is taken away from the real world and he's taken into the server world, where, you know, he meets all the characters, but eventually what he learns is that he himself needs to change, and his expectations also need to change. And to be honest, when you watch the movie, there's one moment that I think could have been crucial to the movie and could have added a lot of heart to it, but I just feel like they didn't invest the time in kind of prepping you for that moment. And it's when everything is going wrong. You know, they're in this basketball game, they're not winning. What LeBron is used to doing is not working, right? Still stuck in his old ways. So then he just tells the Looney Tunes to be themselves. So then we see like a second arc of this basketball game where they're basically just being who they are, and they're moving around, or they're doing a bunch of crazy stuff, and they end up essentially moving the score and winning the game. So what we see ultimately in the movie is LeBron having to let go of his old ways and embracing this new way in order to win this game. And that's how the movie pretty much ends. It ends with LeBron accepting that his kid doesn't like basketball and essentially encouraging him by taking him to a computer or gaming programming camp. And the funny thing about this last scene is, well, there's this awkward hug at the end of it that's just kind of weird. But also it looks like his kid also has had a small change in him, because he does choose to keep a basketball that his dad gives him, showing us that even the son needed to change in some way, shape, or form, right? And I think for us, that's one of the toughest things for us to do, right? Is to embrace change, is to acknowledge that maybe the things that we are doing are wrong, that maybe what we thought was once correct is no longer the way that we should behave. And more often than not, it takes an external force, an external factor to show us that we are wrong, or the things that we're doing need to change in some way, shape, or form. Now, all of this actually reminds me of a character called Paul in the Bible. Now, Paul is actually accredited with most of the writings in the New Testament, most of the writings in the New Testament of the Bible. Now, before Paul was an advocate for Jesus, he actually was one of the greatest persecutors of Christians, until one day Jesus reveals himself while he is on the way to Damascus. Now, what happens here is kind of interesting, because Paul had gone to his authorities to get a letter from them giving him the right to imprison and chain men and women that were followers of Christ and bring him back to be in prison and to be judged by these authorities. So Paul gets this letter, and on his way to start his new vendetta against Christians, Christ appears to him in a blinding light. He actually falls off his horse, and the first thing that we see here is that Jesus says to him, "Paul, why are you persecuting me?" And what we see is a response from Paul acknowledging that Christ is Lord. Now, after Paul's encounter with Jesus, he's actually blind for a few days before he starts his ministry to bring the word of God, to bring the revelation of Christ the Messiah to all of the Gentiles of the area. So what we have here is a man that spent most of his life persecuting Christians. And if you got to see my video on Rengeku where I spoke about Stephen, if you actually read that story, there was a man in the background that was holding the coats of the people that were stoning Stephen named Saul. And Saul is the name attributed to Paul before he actually made his conversion. So even then we see and we have witnesses that saw Paul being part of the persecution of Christians. So we have this man that hates Christians, that wants to persecute them, has an encounter with Christ, and completely changes his way of living. Instead of persecuting Christians, he actually becomes one of the greatest advocates of the Christian faith. And here's the thing. Paul's life wasn't meant to be spent persecuting Christians. And that's what we see in the Bible. His life, what he was purposed to do ultimately, was to spread the word of God to as many people as possible, to have that relationship with God. And that's the thing with humanity, right? God created us so that we would have a relationship with him. However, because of the fall, what has happened is that we have strayed away from our path. We have strayed away from our original purpose. But here's the thing. Thankfully, we have a way back. We have a way back to have that relationship with our Father, to have that relationship with our Creator. And that way back is and only through Jesus Christ. Hey guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you found this video helpful, please make sure to share, like, and subscribe to this channel. If you have any questions or any suggestions for any future videos, please go ahead and comment those below. If you want to see more content from me, here are a couple of suggestions that are going to come up on the screen. And as always, I just want to remind you that we must persevere.